So I'm going to chair this this short panel. We've only got till 8 o'clock. On my right is Nadia Barbu, who's the director of Smile,
Hello.
Which we just saw the world premiere of. So the first thing I want to say is congratulations.
Thank you very much.
And on my left I've got Natalie Wreyford, who is working on a research project on gender inequalities in the UK film industry. She's also spent many years working in the film industry. So we're going to just have a kind of quick chat between these two, and then I'm going to open it up to the floor. So Nadia, can I just ask you to just give us a little bit of context about the making of your film before asking you to then respond to thinking about Born in Flames?
Well, it was essentially born out of personal experience. I've experienced a lot of street harassment ever since I was 12, I think, on a regular basis. And it's the kind of issue that it's very hard to get sympathy for, especially from male friends and other people in my life, because they act as if it doesn't happen to them, it doesn't exist. Essentially, it's just an explosion of anger, I guess, because you're tired of being told to just deal with it, or to treat it as a compliment, as a joke, because it's funny, or you should feel sorry for them because maybe they're mentally ill, which is also kind of an, ableist language. If they're doing this, it must mean they're crazy. So it's just the only way I could deal with it was making this short, in which I'm taking revenge, essentially. And I also wanted it to be a bit funny, because this is the kind of person I am. I'm always trying to find the funny in the bad things, and the bad things in the funny, and they're always intertwined, because our life is comedy and tragedy at the same time.
Thank you. It is interesting watching it in relation to Born in Flames, obviously, because similarly there's a kind of working through on a fantasy level of a response to violence, and I just wanted to know what you thought of Born in Flames then.
Well, I guess the main thing is I had not seen Born in Flames before, so I didn't know why they were screened together. But now that I've seen them, I understand why they're screened together. And I think my film is just the kind of momentary reaction, which doesn't really solve anything. And Born in Flames, if women actually would try to solve this issue and get organized and try to fight against oppression on an organized basis.
There's also, and this may be something that comes up in the discussion as well, Born in Flames was criticised heavily because of the way in which it ends with women taking on state violence through violent means. And I wonder whether you're talking about the humour of that, but actually that is also clearly what's going on in your film, through this kind of staging it as fantasy. And I thought it was really interesting seeing them together anyway. Can I just turn to Natalie and just ask you to just give us a sense of where we are? And actually a question that came up before was whether Born in Flames could be made now. And that is a question about the material conditions of film production. So I wonder if you could say a bit.
It's probably helpful for me to give some background. I worked in the film industry in the UK for around about 14 years. I was at the Film Council fund, and it was my job to find money and give them help. And while I was there, I noticed there weren't very many women coming to us or receiving funds, and I tried to start an initiative to, I suppose it's a bit like a quota now, looking back on it, just to try and give some money to some women to write some films, and I wasn't allowed to do it. And partly the reasons they were giving were, what if it's just the UK Film Council that women don't like? What if women aren't very good at writing and you give them this money and promote them, and then we just show everyone that they're rubbish? So what they did allow me to do was to start researching, and I paid an organisation to research whether it was an actual problem, whether it was just the UK Film Council, whether it's just the UK. Of course it wasn't, it's kind of universal. And it also gave us some actual statistics about the state of creative involvement by women, and also by to some degree other forms of discrimination. So we know, for example, that British films that get made are 84% of them are written by men, and 98% of them are written by white people. So that's kind of the state that we're in at the moment. We had a big conference, invited everyone from the film industry, got them all to kind of look at these statistics, and nothing changed. So now I'm researching it full-time and trying to dig a bit deeper into what the situation is and actually why it's not changing. And I think that's quite important, especially actually in the context of watching this, is that the statistics show year after year after year the same levels for directing, for writing, for producing of women, and it's not getting any better, despite kind of the odd example where it's given a lot of prominence and seems to provide an idea that something's changing.
I wonder whether we could sort of open this out. I wonder whether there's anybody here who saw Born in Flames 30 years ago. This is yay! And whether or not you have, something to think. Because it is really interesting seeing it in 30 years on and thinking about a different political situation. Have you got to tell us then?
Yeah, I saw it in '83, or it was possibly the very beginning of '84. I think it was on the Ritzy. I've been living at Greenham Common for.
Yeah, I saw it when it first came out, and I've been living at Greenham Common for a couple of years. We've been involved in a lot of direct action, feminist action for disarmament, and we'd chosen to do our work non-violently. But my recollection was coming out of it feeling very sort of exhilarated by the fact that this bunch of women had kind of taken control. Whereas watching it now, I didn't feel that. I kept thinking, that obviously with some of the film I was very clearly remembering, but I kept thinking, God, and that shock then with the World Trade Center at the end, of course now we know with 9/11. But I think two key things kind of struck me. One was, I still felt that the takeover of the media, the way they did that, still felt very powerful. And I know that some Greenham women acting, I think, as lesbian Avengers, actually did that. Of course, at Clause 28, went into the BBC. They didn't do it with machine guns. They went in kind of with chutzpah and chained themselves to Sue Lawley's desk just as the 6 o'clock news came on. And that, I think, came out of the image of women. If you couldn't get through the media through being employed, you could at least take it over. And so I still had a very strong. And the other thing I think that was really important to us then was seeing so many black women taking the lead. And Born in Flames was really one of the very first films that I saw where black women were the ones absolutely in charge, taking the lead with the ideas and initiating the action. And I think that was also very powerful. The other weird thing, I'd completely forgotten that they critiqued the whole wages for housework thing, which just now, looking back at the history of that crap, really made me laugh, because obviously that wasn't the future we wanted, and they were quite right in that film.
Thank you. There's a down here, please.
Yes, I also saw the film in 1981, and I too, as a black woman particularly, was amazed to see that many black women on the screen, and even today it still feels pretty wonderful. The other thing that really resonates for me is just seeing the women from the magazine sitting and pontificating about the different approaches that other women were taking and being so critical of it. And I remember feeling that too then, about feeling that the established, if you like, the established women's movement was looking down on those of us who decided that we would take more direct action. So I just think that it would be really great if we could recognise that that really doesn't get us anywhere. It would be really good if we could be a little bit more welcoming of different approaches to feminism.
Yeah, what's really striking about the film, though, is that it's both doing that and commentating on it at the same time. So it's kind of doing that activist work whilst also talking about the ways in which that's difficult and challenging and all the rest of it. I think there's up in the back.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions. It seemed like it was edited, this particular version. I was just curious whether that was the case. Maybe that was my recollection of watching it in the 80s. And then also I've got a question about women directing. I'm aware of Bird's Eye, and some time ago there was, back in the days when there was a women's centre, there was a women's film group, and Channel 4 used to do some stuff which was particularly women. I was curious to know about kind of initiatives. I'm aware of your research, I think that's fantastic. Yeah, that's it, thanks.
That sounds like a question for you. Can I just, on the editing, do you mean, when you, I mean, clearly it's a film that's been edited, but it's you think there are bits that have been cut?
Yes, I believe it was illegal. It wasn't allowed to be shown in this country for some time. Because I know I went to several cinemas and before DVDs, video outlets, and they said no, they weren't allowed to have Born in Flames. And I know I then saw it abroad, and I tried to get it from abroad, and they were saying that in the UK it was banned for a period of time. And then I just wondered whether this particular version was cut, just because I recollect scenes that weren't there today.
That's so interesting. I want to know the answer to that question too. I can't. This is the version that I've seen on VHS. I've never seen it in a cinema before, and but I don't remember any bits that aren't there. So I mean, so it's possible that the same cut version has been circulating. Does anybody else know the answer to that question? Because we're going to find that out after. So Natalie.
Yeah, I'm focusing on screenwriters, and one of the reasons I'm doing that is because it sort of critiques the usual reasons people give as to why there are no women. Like when you say why there are no female directors, everyone just says childcare, and it's obviously not the same thing for screenwriters because they work at home most of the time. They're flexible. I would argue whether that actually makes it easier, but that's a whole different story. But what my research has led me to start to question is whether that is the real reason why there are so few female directors. So I may actually find myself going on to directors next, because things like makeup artists bother me a lot, because they also have to go away on location, and they also have to get up early, often earlier than everybody else, and most of them are women. So it's not like, so what do they, so none of them have children? Is there like a massive amount of people interested in makeup who don't have children? I mean, it strikes me that's not the case. So I'm beginning to think, and also as I learn the reasons why I actually think there are not enough female screenwriters, I think most of those apply to directors as well. There is somebody, I think, about to start a research project about whether film schools put women off directing, because they do enter at about 50%. So I don't know how that's going, but that could be interesting. But I do know that lots of it's quite balanced in short films as well. So it's only when it gets to features that you get a real barrier for women. I don't know. Without going into too much of the things I've researched, I'm really beginning to feel that we just don't tell women's stories, which is why this is so amazing. Women, when they appear on screen, they're in a limited number of roles. In fact, I did my own counting, and I looked at all the films made in Britain in 2011, and how many male and female characters there were, and whether the writer and director were male or female. And what I discovered was that where there was all men creatives, there were 3 women for every 8 men. And where there were all female creatives, there were 2 women for every 3 men. So still more men. So the sort of films that actually get made are, normally still predominantly populated by men. So even if you want to make something, even if you've got the desire to make something, there's so many barriers to overcome to make film. So I don't know whether this sort of film would probably get made, but whether anyone would see it. So I don't know. I don't have enough information about whether there are any initiatives. My research, I've been in touch with most of the senior people in the film industry, most of whom think there isn't a problem. I'm surprised to hear the statistics. I'm also talking to Bird's Eye View Festival about trying to do stuff. So, there are a few of us who want to try and change things, but I think there's still a way to go.
There was a question over here.
Well, the first thing that came to my mind is because maybe it's a self-esteem thing. Because in order to be a director, you need to, share your vision with a group of people, and sometimes when you're a woman, you feel less self-esteem than a man, and maybe you have this fear that people won't respect your vision and won't respect your work, and maybe women don't get to the next level to become directors, because there are plenty of members of crew and producers and etc.
There aren't.
Well, there are more than directors, I guess.
Yeah, there are more than directors. I think you're right. It's definitely a part of it, but I would say, why does that happen to women, and when does that happen to women? And that's why I think the film school example is very interesting, because I've met lots of people at film school who've decided to change from being the director role to something else because they can't stand forward. But I actually, in my research, I'm trying to dig deeper and work out at what point in women's life do they stop standing forward. It's a bit like the Sheryl Sandberg thing. You've got to think about why this is happening. I think it happens at school, but again, that's another kind of story. I think it is, but it's not the only thing. One thing I'm very aware of is that most of the discussions around any kind of diversity in the film industry often put the onus on the individual and talk about what more the individual can do, and there's very little discussion about what is happening on the other side of the table, and I believe there's quite a lot stopping women on the other side of the table.
Thank you. There was a question.
Just one more part of a question, really. Have you developed your research in other industries to do comparison? Because this may happen to other industries as well, to top-level roles or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's not an awful lot of research available. There's certainly stuff in Hollywood. It's exactly the same in Hollywood. It's not so bad in some of the Scandinavian countries and in Australia and Canada, where they actually have a lot more to encourage women. But I think it's something quite deep. We just talked about schools. It's something quite deep in society that's not just about the industries. So no matter how many initiatives you do, there's still going to be problems about what's considered to be a valid story, who is considered to be an exciting protagonist, things like that.
Hi, first of all, it would be really good to find out where we can follow your research and find out what you're doing. So if there's a possibility of announcing where we might be able to get hold of it, that would be really great. And secondly, looking at, as you were just talking about just now, in terms of content and what the lack of female directors and female people in the senior levels of filmmaking, how that will and how that hasn't at least changed the content. Looking at, I was just recently talking with somebody about the Bechdel test, about the content, and I've just looked it up again. It says, ask whether a work of fiction features at least 2 women who talk to each other about something other than a man. And so because so many tests, so many films absolutely fail that, majority of them in the context of what we're looking at, do we really know whether or not that will or won't change the actual content of women? And I wonder if that's part of what you're looking at.
Yeah, I am. I mean, the reason I did that counting was to try and see what the relationship was between female creatives and on-screen content. I was slightly disappointed that it wasn't more dramatic, that there was still more men. But I think I've learned that there is something in that as well. Definitely, there's evidence from Sundance that women directors have more female crew members. I think you can see that women tend to have more rounded characters, tend to pass the Bechdel test more often. But I still think there is a lot of barriers to the stories getting made. I mean, I've read more scripts than I've seen films get made, and the things that don't have currency don't get made. So people are writing them, people want to see them, but they're not getting made. One of the things that worries me is the kind of the kind of discourse around any female success, which is like it's a big surprise, and I can hear it a lot around Catching Fire and things at the moment. And when the Hunger Games came out, all the headlines said surprise. Oh my God, people went to see it. It was a woman, albeit a teenage girl, an attractive one, but it was a female character in a kind of action role, and people went to see it. That's just amazing. And what worries me about it is that that kind of suggests it will never happen again. So instead of saying we should make more because these make money, they go, whoa. Same with Bridesmaids. Gosh, funny women, and people went to see it. Amazing. It will never happen again. So it doesn't convert into business. So that's my main thing.
Your research?
Well, I'm at King's College in London, so you can find out there. Also, I'm on Twitter, so it's just at Natalie Wreyford. So if you want to follow me, I put lots of statistics and things up there about women in the media. So
there's
quick question.
Just before you ask your question, when you've asked your question, would you mind just passing the mic back to that person who's been waiting? Thank you.
Okay. So the same issue came up on the panel last night, which is why I'm interested. But what we didn't really get to do was reach any sort of resolution or have any kind of positive suggestions about what we could do. And I'm a film director, but also a teacher, and I work with students at university level on courses where there is not the same number of male and female students taking the courses, but proportionally a lot more women starting undergraduate courses than we're seeing in the industry. And I do think that there are some issues there in what they experience. It's not, where I teach is not actually a film school, but that university environment or education environment, I think that there are a lot of negative experiences for women trying to put themselves forward in those roles. But yes, so I'm just wondering really, have you got any ideas about what we can do? And you know a lot about what, or you have some idea about what's causing it or what might be causing it.
Can I just ask you to hang on for the other question as well, maybe?
And it's more just a question, I don't want to use this. So, Blue is the Warmest Colour is out, and it's a lesbian love story written by a woman, directed by a man, and kind of almost lambasted by all my lesbian friends. They hate it. I wondered what your opinion is on the subject.
I haven't seen it.
Oh no!
Yet.
Okay, sure.
The only thing that worries me, I suppose, is that it's directed by a man. That does worry me.
I've seen it.
I loved it.
It made me feel really sick because I'm not good with handheld cameras. Oh, sorry. No, this is a terrible thing. It made me feel very unwell because of the in-your-face camera work. But apart from that, the debate has been, hasn't it, that the very long sex scene is inconsistent with the novel that it's based on, or with the way that she intended it to be filmed. So what was your
I'm on the spot. I really liked it. I'm sorry, it was what it is. I think it was the most real lesbian sex that I've seen on TV, screen, whatever. It was a bit long, made me a bit uncomfortable. I giggled a bit, but
actually I thought it was more about the relationship between two women, and it wasn't just about the sex. I thought it was quite an honest portrayal
I felt it, like, it felt some of the emotions.
But is it partly because it's so rare to see, you know, that it's so rare to see a film that's being, you know, shown everywhere and talked about everywhere, well, actually it's about relationships between women, fundamentally, and in a sustained way, and in a way which is, you know, yeah.
Yeah, my argument would just be we need a lot more, because, you know, anything where it's just one, it's kind of held up to such extreme scrutiny on the same subject. They would all treat it in a different manner, and that would give us more of an overview. And that's my whole point about having more voices making films, is that we need to see all different kinds of people and all different kinds of points of view on the same subject. We need to see what women think of men. We need to see, you know, what black filmmakers think of white people. It's kind of, we need to see everything, and in lots of variety, because not one film is going to solve everything or make a definitive statement about anything. I haven't answered your question. I think there's kind of two parts. One is because I actually believe the problem is with the industry to a great extent. That's not something that one person on their own can solve at all. So short of doing that and kind of let's get the women's army up and running, you know, you are going to face barriers. There is evidence that women are more likely to employ women, and the really good thing at the moment is that there are some very powerful women. Tessa Ross at Film 4, Christine Langham at BBC, and you know, several people working under Ben Roberts at the BFI, and they are all actually very committed to changing the situation. In fact, the BFI, I think, have given some money to some producers who are specifically trying to look for projects about and by female creatives. So there are definitely some opportunities. The difficulty is that the hard end of the market, the distribution and the sales, is mostly run by men. So in order to get all of the money together for a film, you have to please them, which is obviously where all these male characters and their subject matter come in. So try and find people. I mean, it is all about who you know. So try and find people who get what you're trying to do. And I would suggest looking at some of those important women as possible friends to get you started.
We're really out of time. Can I just collect here in the middle, and then was there something else around that?
I just wanted to make a very quick point about Blue is Woman's Colour. I think that a lot of the controversy has actually been about the two main actors come out and said that they were coerced and bullied by the director. And I think that that's actually what a lot of the controversy has been about, and I think we should really listen to that and think about that before we go and see the film.
Sorry, am I next?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. No, I just wanted to, I thought it was interesting about what you were saying about female storytelling and how, you know, that done in an empowering way isn't reaching populist audiences in film. Whereas I feel that actually that's being done more successfully, say, in like more modern literature, that actually there is much more of an emphasis on sort of female authorship, or, you know, really kind of much more, much fuller female roles. And I just wondered whether those things actually we can learn about how are, you know, female writers who are writing really good female characters getting their stuff published popularly. The way the film industry isn't.
I did an event at the Hay Literature Festival, must have been 2007. It was just after we published the first report at the Film Council. And we got a panel which was made up of successful novelists who are female and some successful screenwriters who are female, and we kind of wanted to know why there's so many of you, or so few of you. And that was, for me, it was a big thing at the time, because also female novelists write in genres which in the film industry women are considered to not be any good at. And I kept pointing at the book industry and saying, look, they do it over there, why do you think they can't do it? Since getting deeper into my research, I haven't done a lot of research on publishing, but I do understand now that female publishers are more likely to have a pastel book cover, to not be promoted, to not be reviewed, to not be put forward for 3-for-2 deals. So even though there is an equal number of female novelists as male novelists, they are almost still like second-class citizens. they do reach a female audience, but that's partly because books are seen as a female thing and film is seen as a male thing, and that's very true in the industry. It may not be true of the audience, because I don't think that, but the film industry think that men, and young men in particular, go to the cinema and they're not so interested in the female audience, and that's something that has to change, I think.
We really are at the end of our allocated.
Yeah, she is that sort of, I mean, the irony there is because she's made her name, she's the most successful director, but it's all action movies that kind of have an appeal, you know, more, I would say, to men, you know, and is that kind of, if you can't beat them with their own types of films, you've kind of got to join them.
And she hasn't got children.
Ah, well. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much. There's a lot more to be said about this, and the point that was made about the way in which actually how films are made and what kinds of exploitative production in relation to Born in Flames, which is of course a guerrilla type of filmmaking, more or less outside of those kinds of institutional constraints, and in fact her other films later on were much more difficult for her in terms of maintaining control. So there are. So I think that's a very good point. Thank you very much. A really interesting discussion. Thank you.